Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing today? Today's course will be over the names of the Infinite One and the Brotherhood of Men. We have a lot of issues going on the planet. A lot of fighting, senseless fighting at that. So, in order to remedy that, I decided I was going to put together a presentation so that you all could all see what's happening and what's being talked about. And then maybe we can get over our little discrepancies and differences, and the people could actually be united. This is to remove one front of division. So, before we start and get into it, by the way, I don't own any of this media that I'm putting up here, and I'm using this Fair Use Act or whatever, copyright, blah, blah, blah. It's made for a purpose, and also helps it become a little more entertaining. So, before we really get into this, I'm going to go ahead and show you something. Hi, Don. Go ahead and listen to the opening lyrics of this band. What is being said inside this song? Now then, as you can hear, this is the focus, something that wasn't hidden, but was paid attention to. All that needed to happen was for people to listen and love their neighbor as love themselves, and that would have happened, of course, when we got to this eventually. Inside music, high along the opening ceremony, remember that we are all brothers, all people, in beasts and trees and stone and wind. Remember that we all are descended from the one great being. The one great being. Interesting. Now, besides that, there's also, inside popular meter, Game of Thrones, the many-faced God, and Marvel, the one above all. Let's go ahead and look at this real quick. This is one of my favorites. One of my friends say I'm a faceless man. And then technically, I guess I am.
Walks beside a girl across a flowered field. A young man walks beside a girl across a flowered field. Spring has come, and this girl is his life. He prays. A child climbs a tree to watch the sunset over the fields. Summer is ending, and the harvest is life for his village. He prays. A hunter tracks a boar through the woods. Winter is coming, and this boar is life for his family. He prays. But to whom do they pray? The world has as many answers as there are men to answer. But walk far enough, climb high enough, hunt long enough, and a man shall find only one. One God, with many faces. In the faith of the seven, he is the stranger who guides men from this life to the next. Few seek his favor, or at least few realize that they do. In the north of Westeros, he is one of the nameless old gods, staring out from the weirwood trees and the snow. In the Iron Islands, he is the drowned god, calling men down to his watery home. What is dead may never die, but rises again, harder and stronger. In the Far East, he is the Lion of Night, who fathered the world's first emperor and the maiden Maid of Light, and whose wrath nearly ended the world. In Volantis, he is the Lord of Light, whose followers feed men to the flames to beg his favor. In Lys, he is the Weeping Lady, who sheds her tears for the living, soon to die. In Qohor, he is the Black Goat, and he feeds on blood offerings every day. On holy days, he is offered condemned criminals, and in times of great crisis, he may even be offered the noblest children of the city to beg his protection. Does he accept their gift? Well, the city still stands. For the poor, he is the hooded wayfarer. For soldiers, he is Baccarat, the pale child, For sailors, he is the moon pale maiden and the Merlin king. In the house of black and white, however, he is all of them, and none of them. He is the many-faced God, and wherever a man turns, there he is. Men come from every corner of the world to know him, to beg his favor and seek his gift, for themselves, if their life has grown too hard, or for others who are making it so. It is all the same to the many-faced God. While at Elias, all men must serve him, beggars and kings. While at Morgulis, all men must die, good and evil. Men worship as they will, but at the end of every road stands the many-faced God, waiting.
Hear that? That's so tasty. So tasty. Just the way they did that. Just the way that they worked that. I like listening to that. That's what I do to get hyped up sometimes. Alright. So, why am I doing this? What am I going through this for? We have entered into the age of Aquarius for those who know anything about stars and astrology. And this is very important because it means that with the turnover of the age, things have changed. And until the coming of this age, as it says inside the Aquarian Gospel, which was channeled from the Akashic Records. And the Akashic Records are a very real place. I've seen them now. Been there. So, that was interesting. But that's besides the point. This comes from the Aquarian Gospel, chapter 28. I'll go ahead and read this real quick. Udraka gives a feast in Jesus' honor. Jesus speaks on the unity of God and the brotherhood of life. Criticizes the priesthood, becomes the guest of a farmer. Benares, a sacred city of the Brahms. He was inside India at this time. And in Benares, Jesus taught. Udraka was his host. Udraka made a feast in honor of his guests, and many high-born Hindu priests and scribes were there. And Jesus said to them, with much delight, I speak to you concerning life, the brotherhood of life. The universal God is one, yet he is more than one. All things are God. All things are one. By the sweet breaths of God, all life is bound in one. So, if you touch a fiber of a living thing, you send a thrill from the center to the outer bounds of life. And when you crush beneath your foot the meanest worm, you shake the throne of God and cause the sword of right to tremble in its sheath. The bird sings out a song for men, and men vibrate in unison to help it sing. The ant constructs her home. The bee is sheltered in comb. The spider weaves her web, and flowers breathe to them a spirit and their sweet perfumes that gives them strength to toil. Now, men and birds and beasts and creepy things are deities made flesh. How dare men kill anything? 'Tis cruelty to make the world awry. When men have learned that when they harm a living thing, they harm themselves, they surely will not kill, nor cause the thing that God has made to suffer pain. A lawyer said, I pray you, Jesus, tell who is this God you speak about? Where are his priests, his temples, and his shrines? And Jesus said, the God I speak about is everywhere. He cannot be encompassed within walls, nor hedged about with bounds of any kind. All people worship God, the one, but all the people see him not alike. The universal God is wisdom, will, and love. All men see not the true triune God. One sees him as God of might, another as a God of thought, another as God of love. A man's ideal is his God, and so a man unfolds, his God unfolds. Man's God today, tomorrow is not God. The nations of the earth see God from different points of view, and so he does not seem the same to everyone. Man names a part of God he sees, that this to him is all of God, and every nation sees a part of God, and every nation has a name for God. You Brahmins call him Parabrahm. In Egypt he is Thoth, and Zeus is his name in Greece, Jehovah is his Hebrew name. But everywhere he is the causeless cause, the rootless root from which all things have grown. When men become afraid of God and they take him for a foe, they dress up other men in fancy garbs and call them priests, and charge them to strain the wrath of God by prayers when they fail to win his favor by their prayers, to buy him off with sacrifice of animal or bird. When man sees God as one with him, as Father God, he needs no middleman, no priest to intercede. He goes straight up to him and says, my Father God, and then he lays his hands in God's own hands, and all is well. And this is God. You are each one a priest just for yourself, and sacrifice of blood God does not want. Just give your life in sacrificial service to all of life, and God is pleased. When Jesus had thus said, he stood aside. The people were amazed, but struggled among themselves. Some said, he's inspired by Holy Brahm, and others said, he's insane. And others said, he is obsessed. He speaks as devils speak. But Jesus tarried not. Among the guests was one, a tiller of the soul, a generous soul, a seeker of utter truth, who loved the words that Jesus spoke, and Jesus went with him in his own abode. So, as you can see, everyone has become their own priest inside this new age that we've entered into. However, this is not a new age teaching. The problem is people don't understand this is old age. And at the same time, they don't know what they're even worshiping. It'll be explained in a moment. You'll see. You all are family. For some reason, you don't understand that. Now, the Native Americans, we'll start off there. We're going to go back to the tribes, because the tribes are extremely important. And we will be reconstructing the tribes here soon, because you will need to. Otherwise, you will not survive what is to come. It's very important that we actually get ourselves back together as a community, and local community as well as a global community. This is going to happen. You can already see what's happening in Iran or Japan or anywhere. You're already a global society. You can travel from here to the other side of the world from where you live in 24 hours and return home in 48 hours. No longer is it a long, long journey of weeks upon weeks to get just to another state, let alone another country. So this is something that we're going to have to actually discuss as a group of people and be completely logical about, instead of getting all up in arms and my nation's this, because these nations are not great. And besides that, the kingship is soon to descend from the heavens. A new age will begin, and the words of man, if you all do not obey the way things go and change, well, it's not going to be pretty. I can tell you that much. So, for the Native Americans, the Great Spirit is a conception of universal spiritual force, supreme being, or God, also known as Wakatanka among the Sioux, Gitche, Manto, and Algonquin, something like that, and many Native American and Aboriginal Canadians. I put the AB there because they're actually the original Canadians. They call them Aboriginal for some reason, I don't know. Wakatanka is defined as the Great Mystery. So, the being that they know as the Great Spirit, the Creator being, they call it the Great Mystery. Armando Torres and Don Juan, if you go look at the wall on YouTube or watch, there's some of Armando Torres' books. The Mesoamerican shamans say that everyone must feed the eagle. Inside the statement, it appears the eagle will be considered the Lord of all things. So, the Aboriginal people of Australia, the name is Bayame, whatever, came down from the sky to the land, created rivers, mountains, and forests. He then gave the people their laws of life, tradition, song, and culture. He also created the first initiation site. This is also known as Bora, a place where the boys were initiated into manhood. When he was finished, he returned to the sky, and people called him Sky Hero, All Father, or Sky Father. This is the Father actually taking on, not the infinite creator. There's a difference between the infinite creator and the Father. There's the one that divides into the three, which is the triune. From the triune, there's the 7 spirits. We'll get into that further. Right now, we're focusing on the one, but obviously, all Father. There's a connection. Inside Wicca, there's the one or the all. Now, traditionally, inside Wicca, they praise to the god or the goddess. Mainly, the goddess is what I know of. But there is a god that's, mentioned every now and then. There are also several possible theological conceptions of an ultimate impersonal, pantheistic or monotheistic divinity, known variously as the Dragonthon, or the one or the all. The impersonal ultimate divinity is generally regarded as unknowable and is acknowledged but not worshipped. That's the problem. You're supposed to pay attention to the one. That's where you have to return to get all your powers and abilities, which even whenever I do finally start remembering and manifesting all my extra things, I won't even be shown anything, really, because, well, every time someone shows something, humans kill them. And even if Jesus himself walked the world today, and it was out here healing people, people would still do the same thing and call him a demon. So you all learn absolutely nothing. Well, the majority of people would learn nothing. And there'd be the fanatics that would run around and start a cult behind the person when they don't want a cult. There's always something going on. This monotheistic idea of an ultimate and personal divinity is not to be confused with the monotheistic idea of a single supreme personal deity, especially since the Wiccan tradition honors its two supreme deities, the gods and God, as equal. Then personal ultimate divinity may also be regarded as an underlying order or organizing principle within the world, similar to religious ideas such as Tao or Atman. It is the one that creates all things. Inside Shinto is called Amen Om Ina Kanushi, heavenly ancestral god of the originating heart of the universe. And according to Shinto Kojiki, the first kami god and the source of the universe. In Japanese mythology, Amen Om Ina Kanushi is described as a god who came into being alone, Hitoragami. The first of the Zoka Sanshin, 3 kamis of creation, and one of the 5 Kata Amatsuki Yami, the distinguished heavenly gods. Amenokushi has been considered a concept developed under the influence of Chinese thought, but now most scholars believe it's some original Japanese idea. The Chinese. The great Tao, Lao Tzu, and the Tao Te Ching explains that the Tao is not a name for a thing, but the underlying natural order of the universe whose ultimate essence is difficult to circumscribe due to it being non-conceptual, yet evident in one's being aliveness. The Tao is eternally nameless, and to be distinguished from countless named things which can be considered to be its manifestations, the reality of life before its descriptions of it. Inside Egypt, its name is Atum, the greater god of the Egyptians. Atum's name is something derived from Tum, which means to complete or to finish. Thus he has been interpreted as being the completed one, and also the finisher of the world, which he returns to watery chaos at the end of the creative cycle. As creator, he was seen as the underlying substance of the world. The deities and all things being made of his flesh are alternatively being his Ka. He is also known as the Amen. When you say Amen, Amen, you're saying technically Amen Ra to the sun god. All this is a part of astrotheology, which people will find very hard to believe. But at the same time, it is what it is. What can you do about it? Inside India, my favorite name is Shiva. Shiva means he who is not the unnamed one. When the Adi Yogi came and sat down and started teaching yoga, he didn't even tell his name. He didn't care to tell his name. He just did what he wanted, and he taught the people yoga that sat there and waited long enough once he paid attention to him. It's also known as Om, the great vibration or the originating vibration of the universe. It is Mahadeva, the Lord of Lords, which is also another name for Shiva. He who is not, the unnamed one, the cause is cause, the root is root, all that. Greece and Roman. Chaos is the originating god for the Greeks and Romans. Aside the pre-Socrates used the Greek term and the concept of the cosmology. Aside chaos has been interpreted as either the gaping void above the earth created when earth and sky were separated from their primordial unity, or the gaping space below the earth on which the earth rests. In the Assad theogony, chaos was the first thing to exist. At first, chaos came to be, or was, but next, possibly out of chaos, came Gaia, Tartarus, and Eros, elsewhere the son of Aphrodite. Unambiguously born from chaos were Erebus and Nyx. For Assad, chaos, like Tartarus, though personified enough to have born children, was also a place, far away underground and gloomy, behind which lived the Titans. And the earth and the oceans and the upper air, it was also capable of being affected by Zeus's thunderbolts. So, if you watch the gods of Egypt, you can also see Ra using his fire against the chaos that comes. But the chaos is technically a part of the infinite creator. It's just that the beings here were trying to maintain order and stay on top for whatever their legends are. Even if those legends aren't true. The fact is, this is the originating principle of the deities that people, all of the different religions, or spiritual past. They all link back to one thing, it seemed. Norse, at the beginning, there were two realms, one filled with cold mist, the other with raging flames, and the primordial void between them. The primordial void was removed by who? The infinite creator. The Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Psalms 82. The Lord Elohim stands in the congregation of the mighty, he judges among gods, which means there are other gods lower than him, lower than it, but they're still been reborn. They're still deities. Let them praise the name of the Lord, for his name alone is excellent. His glory is above the heaven, above them and the heaven, I guess. Psalm 148:13. Do you not know, have you not heard, the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, does not become weary or tired. His understanding is inscrutable. Isaiah 40:20. There's also Isaiah 45:7, where it says, I, the Lord, create darkness and light and make evil and peace and all that stuff. So, as you can see, there's capital L-O-R-D. That capital L-O-R-D is speaking of the highest of the high. Christianity, the unknown God. It's at Acts 17:23-25. It says, let me declare to you the unknown God that you all do not know. The Lord that made the heaven and earth and all things therein dwells not in temples made with hands, nor does it require anything from you, seeing that it made all things. So naturally, you know how people do the blood sacrifices and they try to offer tithing to God. You can't give anything to it because it made everything. Money is not a currency for spiritual entitlement and for spiritual entry. And surely you've read where it says it's easier for a camel to pass through a needle of the eye than for a rich man to enter into heaven. It's not about your riches or your money. That has nothing to do with it. And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And there you say capital M-E, me, as in within you. This gets into what the Christ actually is. That's going to be another episode on the next day, probably. I'll do something over what that is. But at the same point in time, this is what we have. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. And from now on, you know him and have seen the Son. John 14:6-11. There's extra stuff that's there. And of course, Islam, the Shahada, Arabic as Shahada, the testimony, also spelled Shahada, is an Islamic creed, one of the 5 pillars of Islam, and part of the Adhan, declaring belief in the oneness, Tawhid, of God and the acceptance of Muhammad as God's messenger. The above statements are commonly prefaced by the phrase Asadu, and I bear witness to that, yielding the full form of Asadu an ilaha wa Asadu ana Muhammadin Rasulullah ilaha. I bear witness that there is no deity but God, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God. So naturally, he was one of the people from that went out into the wilderness and became, he ascended to become a prophet in return and tell people there's only one God. That's why they go around destroying all the other steeples and everything else and temples of other gods, because they consider it to be idolatry. You shouldn't have any graven images of the Lord or of any other idols, because when you start praising other idols, you forget about the one, which seems to be what everyone always forgets, that there is a unifying principle that drives all things within our bodies. Now we get to the black holes. Mathematics would be impossible within the singularity center of the black hole. We're going to watch Nassim Haramein real quick and let him explain it to you in scientific terms for those of you who prefer to have science. Because not everyone believes that there's actually a creator or anything like that. Some people just think that there's nothing. Well, I can tell you this much. Go and access your pineal gland, and you will be able to go to the creator once you turn things on. That's what it's written for. Let's go ahead and get into this.
We've got the density of the vacuum. Well, to give you an idea of how dense is that, imagine that you took all of the stars we see in the universe, There's billions of galaxies, they have billions of stars in them. Some of the stars are even much larger than our sun. And we took them all and we squished them all into a centimeter cube of space with like this huge trash compactor or something. You still wouldn't have the energy density of the vacuum, because the universe is approximately 10 to the 55th gram. So 10 to the 55th gram squeezed into a centimeter cube of space is still some 39 orders of magnitude smaller than the structure of the vacuum, the density of the vacuum. So to think of empty space as empty is incorrect. Space is full. It's full of these fluctuations. It's full of this energy density that is actually, according to what I found, the source of all of reality. The negative space is what produces our material world. Based on this, I started to think about it in terms of division of this vacuum density. I started to think of our reality not as object in the space, but as division of the space. I started to think maybe we could start to find patterns in the division of the space. Elizabeth Rauscher and I published a paper, and this paper described a scaling law. The scaling law is simple. On one side, we have energy density, and on the other, we have a radius. So the graph represents energy in terms of hertz in one direction, and the radius in the other. And we started to plot all of the objects we see in the universe. We started with the universe itself. We ran the equations and we took the data that's available to approximate the radius of our universe. And then we approximated its energy levels, and we plotted the first data point. When you look at our universe, its size, and the amount of material in it, you find that actually our universe obeys the condition of a black hole. Our universe is too dense for light to actually escape it. If we were to shine a laser in our universe right now, it would get bent a little bit by our local star, our sun. And then it would eventually get to another star and get bent a little bit more. And it would get to another star and get bent by that gravitational field and get bent by gravitational fields of galaxy and all this. And because there's so much mass, there's so much matter in our universe, in its radius, in the closed universe, actually light would not be able to escape it. It would come back onto itself. So in fact, our universe can be considered as a black hole. Technically, it obeys that condition. Did you know you live in a black hole universe?
Inside the center of singularity, singularity leads to everywhere. Everything's a black hole, nothing ever escaped the black hole. It's all one thing. But
The universe, with its black hole condition, was the first data point Harriman charted. He next added galactic centers and stars. They lined up in a linear progression with the universe. An amazing result. If the vacuum is the source of the division, then it divides in very specific relationships. The next step was to see if the pattern continued on the other end of the physics scale.
Now we went from stars all the way down to atoms, right across the quantum world, from relativistic equation to the quantum world, and we plotted the energy level of an atom and its radius. And sure enough, the data point lined up again. Now that's a huge jump. And then we went all the way down
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct.
To the Planck's distance, singularity, and that lined up as well. All the way from universe, which is immense, to a teeny point, billions and billions and billions of times smaller than an atom. And all this, all the data points in between, lining up so very closely to a perfect linear progression. Remarkable. Showing that there is structure, that there is order, that the vacuum is dividing in very specific relationships. And when we start to look at the relationship between the divisions of the data points, we found that the relationships were very close to phi ratios. The phi ratio is found everywhere in nature. When you look at your hand, the end of your finger is 1.618, which is the phi ratio, smaller than the second part of your finger. And the second part is 1.618, smaller than the third part. And your hand relative to your forearm, your arms relative to your body, and so on. Those Fibonacci sequence of phi ratios are found everywhere in nature, in plants, in flowers, the branches of a tree, the roots of a tree, the nervous system of your body, all of the division that produces all of the arteries and the veins of your body, and so on. All phi ratios, all Fibonacci series.
The phi ratio is evident even beyond where our eyes can see. The most recent discovery confirmed that the phi ratio exists even at the atomic level. Researchers in Germany observed that a chain of atoms acts like a nanoscale musical instrument, whereby the phi ratio seems to be the preferred division of the musical notes.
So it was remarkable to find it on such a huge scale. It indicated that the scaling law was correct, that the structure is evident and it is present even on enormous scale. Where is the structure coming from? Most likely from the structure of the vacuum itself, the division of the vacuum. It was clear to me that the vacuum must have fundamental structure. There was another data point that was very interesting. When you take the biological resolution, the microtubules, which are small entities that makes up the structure of cells, they are much, much, much larger than atoms, but they oscillate at a very high rate, 10 to the 11 to 10 to the 14 hertz. So we plotted the microtubules on their scaling law. And sure enough, amazingly, it almost landed on the linear progression perfectly and divided the scale almost in the middle, between the extremely large and the extremely small. There was this biological entity that makes up the biological world, as if biology, as if your structure is the boundary condition that divides the extremely large to the extremely small. You are the event horizon. It started to make sense that all this organization would include the biological structure. Because when we see our biological world, when we see our environment, when we see our biosphere, it's highly organized and these phi ratios are found everywhere. There was another data point that was interesting in the scaling law. the atomic level is in between the universal size and the Planck's distance. Now, as we saw, the universal size can be considered a black hole. It obeys the Schwarzschild condition. And the Planck's distance obeys the Schwarzschild condition. So, having the atom right there on that linear progression started to indicate that the atom may be a black hole itself. As we saw earlier, the division of the space can be done to infinity. If an atom has subatomic particles that are made out of sub-subatomic particles that are made out of sub-sub-subatomic particles and so on to infinity, and each one has a mass, then there's infinite mass at the center of atoms. And to me, very early, I concluded they must be mini black holes. From this conclusion, I extrapolated that there must be a black hole at the center of all galaxies. I said that very early, almost 17 years ago. However, at the time, there was not much data about the center of galaxies. So many physicists thought this was improbable. Eventually, we got more and more data about the center of galaxies, and we found that there is a black hole at the center of what seems to be every galaxy we observe. So that confirmed that I was on the right track. But how?
I see. I'm not going to go any longer than that. As you can tell, it's a really long video. To end the video, I'm going to read from the Children of the Law 1 and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis. Actually, one of my favorite books I've been reading here of late. For the concepts. Now, we're going to go ahead and see what it says. Redefining God and love. First, let me cover some important ground. This is page 27, by the way. Things that I learned in my earliest days at the monastery that will give you a frame of reference. So before we delve deeper into the teachings, let's clarify the meanings of a couple of words, concepts that will be used in a great deal in this book, God and love, in a different way than you may have heard them used before. Both terms and concepts can mean many different things to many different people. Love. In my first days in the monastery, in months of the monastery, I attended courses given by elder monks. And one of my World Human Concept and Terminology courses, which was given by the elder monk Raga, we began covering the teachings of the various types of emotions that people often love together and called love. Love can mean sex, we made love. Love can mean you really like something, I love my new car. Love can mean the pleasure or thrill you get from someone you have a romantic relationship with. I love Nadia. Or love can mean compassion, kindness, caring, giving, sharing. That's the kind of love that brings true happiness and inner peace. It's the kind of love we all really need and need to give. It's also the kind of love that would make the world a far better place. So if we wish to focus on developing this kind of love, we must clearly delineate it and give it a name. Thus we call it unselfish love, because that's what it is. God. Raga went on to define the various ways that people of the world see and understand God. God is a very abstract and difficult thing for the human mind to fathom. To paraphrase the ancient teaching, the God I'm talking about cannot be talked about. It means that God is really impossible to explain or truly understand intellectually. But with that in mind, I will endeavor to explain the unexplainable. The big guy in the sky concept of God. People have often personalized and humanized the concept of God. Whether consciously or subconsciously, many people think of God as having a human-like appearance. A great big man with long silver hair and a great beard that lives somewhere out there beyond the sky in heaven. That has always bothered me. Why do people think of God that way? I said, there are several reasons why people think of God this way. Partly it's due to how hard it is to grasp such an infinite and abstract concept as God. But unfortunately, sometimes the human-like idea of God was deliberately fostered as a means to gain wealth or power over the masses, which we can clearly see that inside of the churches, which I call them the apostate churches. I don't really believe that they're actually, well, some of them, they're decent. They're good people trying to spread word. But they teach fear and guilt instead of teaching what needs to be taught. 2, a means to justify cruel, horrible things some men wanted to do, like war. And how many names have wars? How many wars have been fought inside the name of God or inside the name of a prophet, whenever all the prophets were pushing and showing you there's only one thing. There is one infinite creator that comes from, makes all things. And it imbues the life breath on all of us. You all are all worshiping the same exact being where you're supposed to be. And you're arguing over little bitty things like children. Instead of growing up and being like, well, this thing is unnamed, unknowable, and the way you're supposed to be back to it is the pineal gland. 3, a means of propagating sexism. Or 4, all of the above. Surely enough, we've done wrong. Unfortunately, with that kind of human-like conceptualization of God, also comes a sign of human-like personality traits of God. And some of them are the very human-like negative personality traits, such as anger, jealousy, and vengefulness. The followers of many different religions have their own personalized versions of a humanized God. Some versions of God have similar personality traits, but there are various differences. Subsequently, the rules that people believe He has given for us to obey are sometimes similar and sometimes very different. Is that a problem though? Why can't people all have their own ideas of God that makes them happy and fits into their culture, I asked. They can. They are welcome to it. We don't care about what name of God or idea of God they believe in. If it helps them become a better kind of person, people, that's all our only concern. But think about it. People even go to war because their personalized version of God is different than someone else's. And of course, each side in the war always believes God is on their side. Understanding the universality and oneness of God eliminates this, and many other tragic acts. You, who will be teachers in various parts of the world, will be confronted with this constantly, and you will need to understand the various concepts of personalized gods in order for you to reveal that there is more to God that goes beyond what they think. Many things about the various personalized gods just don't make sense. This includes both things that God does and the things God doesn't do or allows. For instance, animals and innocent children are suffering on the planet. Why? If you accept the human-like version of God, why does it put a stop to this? Many people who have limited views on God can understand that when you explain it to them, as long as they have the slightest open mind, and the Spirit of God is present in you when you explain it to them. Now let's consider God in a different, unhumanized way. Good God. The Children of Law 1 teaches that God is all, and includes all. It is one. That includes the many. It is within us, without us, and we are individual parts of the whole of it. While many religions have a similar identical concepts of the one God in the scriptures, they may still use the idea that their God is different from the others as a reason for war and killing. One of the problems is that while many religions do teach that God is one, is all things, is everywhere, etc., they still propagate the concept of a human-like God in the sky, and thus the religion's followers still seem to think of God in that way. They also seem to teach that it is only the religion that has one God, rather than that God is the one, the oneness of all. But some religions don't teach that, do they? Even if a religion isn't propagating the humanized God concept, people still usually think that way. I will explain why in a moment, but first let's look at the consequences of thinking of God in a humanized fashion, regardless of why they do. Unfortunately, the humanized God idea naturally leads to thinking of God as an individual source. Then a person or a religion's God can be given all kinds of personal traits that either the individual or the religion wants God to have in order to justify their human behavior. But that whole idea goes against the God is everywhere and everything concept. Because if God is thought of as an individual, that also leaves us with the impression that He is separate from us in the universe. But if there is one God, which is all and everywhere at all times, etc., it can't be separate from us or the universe. So it can't be an individual in any normal interpretation of the word. Other than if you consider everything in the universe, the entire universe itself as one universe, and in some sense, then as an individual. So God is an individual also, in some sense. Let's contemplate that for a moment. We know the universe is one huge, probably infinite something that is everywhere and everything. All existence as we know it, etc. Even our bodies are composed of stardust, the stuff of the universe. Doesn't it stand to reason then that one God must also be the very universe itself? And if that is so, there is some sort of design, consciousness, and energy that pervades the entire universe, all creation. Wouldn't that be God's spirit and consciousness? This consciousness of God is the consciousness of the universe. Universal consciousness, then is a consciousness that is one and the same as God's. And thus the Spirit of God, the life force that is all creation, is the spirit of the universe. The universal spirit, Once all humans had the consciousness of their oneness with the universal spirit. And that is why you are here, to regain that universal consciousness and oneness with God. Then you will be lamps to help others regain their lost way also. So for clarity, the majority of this book, God will often be referred to as the universal spirit, or sometimes as the one. It helps to clarify when we are speaking of God, we are not referring to the big guy in the sky concept of God, but even though using the words universal spirit helps prevent the confusion with the humanized God concept, the term God will still be used from time to time throughout the book. When it is, just keep in mind that it means us. Back to my course of Raja. To summarize, the children of the law of one teach that the universal spirit, rather than being an individual as we know it, as a multiplicity that is one. It comprises and is all things, is the entire universe. Together as one, it is the beingness, energy, essence, and life force that everywhere and everything is the universe, including us, including nature, and including the universe itself. All has its consciousness. Also include, as a part of the universal spirit, and the oneness that is universal spirit is a hierarchy of spiritual beings who exist on many different levels. You might think of them as angels, guardian angels, ascended masters, adepts, or saints who have passed on. Being free from limitations of physical life, they exist in spiritual form, and they share the same consciousness as universal spirit, universal consciousness. They are consciously part of, one with, and an aspect of the universal spirit. Hierarchical beings thus act in harmony with the will of the universal spirit, as if they were arms or extensions of it. Yet they are somewhat related to us, and thus close to us also. So they are links to the entirety of universal spirit, who can help guide us in a certain influence in our lives. Is that what some people call guardian angels? Yes, but it's just one of the many beings that form a link of the hierarchy, and the universal spirit is also comprised of this great link of oneness. So, as you can see and read, everyone all reaches back to one. There's, even the science is showing it's all one big something that comes from one thing that people have no idea. And the reason why the thing is jealous is because it's inside of everyone. There's no way you should forget it. It actually dreams with you while you're sleeping. It's there. It takes on different faces and different forms, and it plays within your dreams with you. Whenever you daydream and you see random people walking by, or you think of random things, it's watching your thoughts and watching your script and everything. It's watching how you want things to go. As you pray for things and put information out there, but then you say you don't want it later and you block yourself, it happens. Like, the system that you think you know is not the way that it is. Really, there should be no fighting amongst anyone. There is no reason for war. There is no longer. I mean, just with this simple little doohickey I've done, there's not been a reason for war now. At least not inside the religious aspect. Everyone needs to come together. We have a very difficult time that is ahead of us and that is coming. We will need all people of all faiths and beliefs to be able to be one, if we are to get through the hardships that those who love us so much are planning on putting us through, especially with coming food shortages and other things that are designed to make you stressful, since you do not know all the deeper meanings and ways of doing things. Now will be the time soon for us to gather together and be in our communities. You must be able to tolerate each other and different people of different faces and faiths. If you cannot, then, well, your children will suffer for your own mistakes. This has been a class over the one and also the Brotherhood of Men. Let us move forward now into the new age appropriately, as we should, by sitting here and bickering over old things. All of us on the low end are being screwed over by those on the higher end, and it's about time that we unify and start to do things. And it doesn't require violence. It just requires us not to consent to what they want us to do. You have to be your own person. Grab your nuts and let's go. That's how I say things anyway. I'm not exactly proper and prim. I hope you all enjoyed the class, and I'll be back later with another one.